Hello everyone and welcome to another one of what I'm calling the Quarantine Edition interview episodes of the SWW show. I'm Mike. Today I have with me a returning guest from I looked it up about a year ago. So could you please remind everyone who you are and where you work for?
Yeah, hello. My name is Rune Drusen and I'm part of the company called Triband and we are based in Copenhagen, Denmark.
That's right. We have, now I can say it since the last time we talked to you, the award-winning Triband, I think would be the correct phrase of putting it. Because I believe you guys, so I looked it up, I think this was a little before What the Golf came out when we talked. So What the Golf, I would say, hopefully to you too, was a successful smashing hit.
We're quite happy at the moment, everything considered. Like the next big thing for us and where the focus is at the moment is for the Switch release. So that's a bit stressful, but everything seems to go according to plan, even with the corona and everything. So that's kind of where our focus is at the moment. So I don't think we have had the time to celebrate the awards at all. Like it also feels super strange to win an award on an online show.
Oh yeah, that has to be the extra weird thing of like... But weren't you guys, if I remember right, yeah, because you guys were up for the GDC Awards? Is that it?
Yes, that was it. We won that, and then we actually also got nominated for a BAFTA, but we didn't win that, unfortunately.
Okay, but I'm going to go with, BAFTA's one of the few things they truly mean it when they say it was an honor to be nominated. Like that one, that's when you get nominated for a BAFTA, at that point you're like, okay, we did something decently right.
Sure, and also like our game is still fairly hard to come by because you need to have the Apple Arcade if you want to play it on the phone. So it's actually only on the iOS thing. So if you're on Android, you can't be part of the party. And we were up against like major players, Call of Duty and Pokemon Go. So that was. Basically, they'll just send out a newsletter, we are nominated, and then that's an instant win. Also because this category was like the popularity, like everybody could vote in that category we were nominated for. Apparently, it seems like 2 years ago, they found out that nobody was making any good mobile games anymore, so they kind of removed the mobile games out of the main contest. So that's actually not judged by a jury, but that's just judged by people voting.
When we first talked, that has fundamentally changed, is when we talked, you were not publicly an Apple Arcade game.
No.
So
no, we were not.
I'm curious, and what you can tell or want to talk about, how did that come to be? Do you reach out to Apple? Does Apple go, here are cool games?
Actually, we talked to a Danish representative of the Apple Store, and he was like if you're not gonna get picked up by the Apple Arcade, I really want to feature the game because I think it's amazing. But I'm pretty sure that Apple Arcade will find it excellent and will feel like it's a very good match for their thing. And he was right. So basically, Apple contacted us, and we started negotiations, and then we were kind of on board that crazy Apple shit.
When I first was announced, I was like, wait, I never recognized that game. It was this thing of like, it was very interesting to watch. Because what was interesting is I would argue that, because Apple very much had this swath of like, brand new developers to developers who have some background to AAA level things, and it's like, oh, Apple Arcade's this weird beast that I feel like we were all surprised how successful it quickly became.
And it was like... But it's the strange thing with Apple, like when they put their minds to something, it's normally a success. So we were kind of sure that if we went with this, we would do fine. And then we were super lucky that we were one of the first games that were in the Apple Arcade. So we're kind of the first wave of games, which is amazing because then you can go where nobody's gone before in a certain way, which is nice.
Yeah, that is amazing. So I'm curious. So you said the game's on Apple Arcade. The game's on Steam. The game's
No, the game is on not on Steam but on Epic. We also got
that was what it was. That was the other
yes,
change.
yes. We also got approached by Epic, and they asked us if we wanted to do a deal with them. And of course, we said yes to the money and jumped on board that Epic train. So the next plan after the Switch launch is definitely a Steam launch, but we can't do that until October because we are tied up to Epic.
That is very interesting. You guys, I would say lucked out, but really it just worked out in the sense of you went from, okay, here's this deal for this platform, this deal for this platform that are both exclusive, but they're such different platforms you could have both of them.
Precisely. So we're having the cake and eating it too.
So then I'm curious. So you guys are on mobile. So I'm assuming, we'll say within relative reason, porting the game to Switch is less of a hassle than it could be.
But we were super lazy, so we actually hired somebody to do the work for us, who actually had experience with this, because we could see if we had to do it, it would just take forever because we had no expertise in porting to the Switch at all. So we kind of decided that with the Switch port, we wanted to add something extra. So there's actually coming some features on the Switch, and I haven't told anybody about them yet, so it's still a big secret. But if you buy it on the Switch, you'll actually get something that you won't get on the other games consoles.
Wow, aren't we being Mr. Secretive over here? So there's something mostly exclusive to the Nintendo Switch if you buy that version. Got it.
Precisely.
So on Switch, so is that the end, would you say, of what the golf porting then, once you do the Steam and Switch port?
I think eventually it would be super nice to also do like PlayStation for sure, but it's not in the pipeline at the moment. We also want to do a lot of updates for the game, because a lot of people have asked us for that. And it's also part of kind of the Apple deal that you submit your game to them, but you need to make sure that it continues to develop in a way. So we're gonna do more levels and extra areas and stuff like that for it.
That's interesting. I don't know if I realized that part of the deal was continual updates to it in some capacity.
It is.
That's interesting. So, what otherwise, as we were talking about the golf more, but I'm curious if you guys have talked about that I've missed anything else that's next in the pipeline for you guys, or is it just continual with the golf support right now?
We have some other games that are still kind of like on the sketchboard, but I think it would be super fun at some point to experiment with VR, for example, to do what the golf VR and figure out if we can get that to work.
For you, I'm going to warn you, is massive motion sickness if you do all of the crazy stuff with the guy you do in the game, because I feel like don't flip someone physically the entire time.
No, like definitely we need to go some place else with it. It won't be like just a port. Like we need to come up with new stuff, but within the, let's say, the setting of what the golf and the law of what the golf.
Record, I think you do really cool things, but yeah, in my head I'm just picturing like you just straight port the game and you just put the camera on the guy, and then all of a sudden like you start flipping in the air the entire time.
And everybody just throws up. Yeah.
Hey, I guarantee you, it'd be like how you guys had this game. You had all of the great gifts for pushing stuff out. You'd have the best gifts also of people puking to push the game out for good PR.
Yeah. And as we know, puke sells. So.
See, and there's the tagline for it. It's perfect. You TikTok, I think it's TikTok, you hashtag it, you're good to go, you rub your hands, make money.
Yeah. Hashtag what the puke.
Cool. Right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm curious now that you guys are still in active development, but fundamentally a good chunk of what the golf is out, and you've seen it over the year. One of the things I think we talked about last time too, with the marketing approach of it was the game was very giftable. I think was your quote. Um, I'm curious, is that just going to be a trend now with the rest of your games of being like it has to be this very like I don't say gimmicky, but this very easily showable of what it is?
The goal of the company is basically to make people laugh, and that feels like a super good goal at the moment since the world is turning into a horrible place. So like if we look at, I don't know, 3 years or 5 years, the goal would be to create 1,000 hours of funny content, and I mean content that people would laugh off, like. So basically, we kind of need to look at the whole what the golf franchise may be more like a sitcom or movies or something like that. Because I think we need to go different directions with this.
In your head, then it sounds like that you want to some capacity, as you talk about obviously the joke and VR thing, you want to some capacity stay in the what the golf world or theme or something like that.
Well, I think at the moment it makes sense to stay in that, but like we are willing to change, like go wherever people want us to go in a way. Um, Not necessarily like if every we're not. I'm not talking about doing a plus one game or something like that. But like if people find the stuff that we make not funny, I think it's then we need to figure out like what other horse could we bet on. But at the moment, everybody seems pleased with what the golf and what we're doing. So I think it makes sense to stay within that. But it still needs to be fun to us for us, and it needs to be fun and challenging for us to do as well. So like instead of just diving in to do what the golf 2 or something like that, I think we just need to figure out how could we explore different directions and what could we do that would like be puzzling and tricky for us to do, and that we would find intriguing and exciting. Because I think a lot of the backbone of what the golf is that it's easy for the gamer when they play the game to see that we had fun making the game. And I think that's super important that we communicate that it's not just work, it's actually us having fun with you and you're part of the club.
No, I agree. That is, I do like the line right there of the idea of a game is more fun when you can tell the devs had fun making it. It's kind of like I feel like when devs make like super serious games, they have to like be in the most depressed humanly state possible, and it comes across as realistic because inherently you're putting so much of yourself into the game.
Yeah, and a lot of companies are really good at doing that. So I don't think we should ever compete with those companies. I think we should just like do what we do best, and that's just goofing around and being silly. And hopefully we can continue to doing that. But like with the Apple deal and with the Epic deal, for sure, now we are in a good position and we have scaled up and we changed office. We actually moved out of our small basement and now we are on the first floor. So we're actually up in the light and everything feels amazing. But it's also super strange because we can't be there because of the lockdown will send everybody home. So it's a very strange situation to be able to scale up in these kind of times. But luckily for us, like the team can work remote. Like I'm very glad we don't have a sushi restaurant or I don't know, a nail salon or something like that, because then we would be fucked. Pardon my French.
So I'm curious actually now that you kind of brought that up because obviously we're recording this during the great pandemic of 2020, what will eventually be known as. How so? Like you guys a little bit different than like American stuff because I think when your lockdown took effect and the warning. How has that been from transitioning the studio very quickly to physically being everywhere to, okay, everyone go remote now?
Interesting because I think 3 or 4 days before there was like a lockdown from the government, we kind of sat down and had a talk about this. And like on management level and said, this is pretty serious and I think we need to do something about that. So in a certain way, we were prepared. Like we were not super prepared, but at least we had 4 days to figure out if we could do it and how we could do it. And I think that's our luck in a way, because then we could kind of come up with an emergency plan.
I assume emergency plan had to be fundamentally okay. Everyone has a computer. Have a good day. But so
Yeah.
I'm curious, communication wise, has it broken down, or have you guys been like, okay, we relatively have been on the same pace and communication throughout the entire team?
I think what this coronavirus is lacking is people seeing each other and having fun with their colleagues, and that's sad. But then we also played some games together online and stuff like that. So we kind of experimented with figuring out a way to actually be social together also. So it wasn't all work related. And I think it's important that there needs to be this work-life balance in a way. So there's a lot of meetings online and things tend to go a bit slower, but I think we are still on the right track. I think the most annoying stuff for us is that everybody else slows down. So for example, when we're talking to Nintendo and we send our game to .check, it'll all of a sudden take forever to get past that because they man down their end. Or if we talk to Apple or something like that, they man down their end. So everything that communication-wise to the outside world has been cluttered or is going very slow. And us amongst ourselves, I feel we're very good on top of it.
So I'm gonna make this now a little more. Let's jump to a more sweet and calmer side for a second.
Sure.
I'm curious now that we talk about again what the golf's been out for a hot minute on a majority level at this point. Do you have any of those favorite videos that you saw of people freaking out or playing the game that really you're oh, we did something right?
I love the whole onboarding of the game. The game starts with people thinking they're actually playing a golf game, and on the second level you just golf the golfer and everything is just wow, what kind of madness is this? And then they actually kind of play a small tutorial, but they don't even know they're playing a tutorial, and then the game starts. And that moment when they hit this giant pipe and they go into the secret lab and everything is in front of them and you just see that excitement in their eyes, that's amazing. Just when the title screen hits and you hear the music and they're oh my god, that was only the tutorial, this is going to be insane. That's wonderful.
That's a good one. Now, do you have any more things that you're okay, next time we make a game of this kin that we're not... Do you have anything regrets of okay, we're not going to do this again or anything like that?
Well, I think that the way the game is built up is that you find a flag in this secret lab and then you play it, but you can play the same flag 3 times. So there's the first level is just the base level, and then there's kind of a part challenge or something like that, and then there's something silly in the end, like a reward. And I think it's very annoying when you see a streamer or somebody who is actually a completionist, and they, instead of just playing the first flag, they want to complete everything, because it really wrecks the flow of the game and the humor of the game. But enjoy it anyway, but for me as a developer, I just find, play the next flag instead. Oh no, you can't do this. Oh my god, it's horrible to watch. You tried 20 times. You're losing your viewers. Don't do it. Yeah. Give up.
for record, because especially because your game is very puzzly and confusing, and I think at face value, like what you do in a level sometimes, I can only imagine being the one who would know the rules, watching people being like, "Oh God, it's right there. Just go straight forward. Stop this."
Yeah. Also, sometimes people do something and they come to the wrong conclusion or something. Oh, there's nothing over here, and blah blah. Oh my God, you didn't hit that. Oh, did you see that? Oh, we should have put huge arrows on that or something like that. And it's also horrible to watch somebody play it and then you can see the game is glitching somehow. There's graphic glitches or something like that. But like people don't care. It's a silly game and they don't even see it. But like that's the only thing you see when you made it. Like, oh my God, I wish we spent more time on this. Yeah.
Yeah, I can again. It's. I never envy the people who make puzzle games. I never envy people who have to watch people play the puzzle games they made, because I don't know which is more frustrating.
It's also actually, it's kind of playing the game, and that's kind of funny because they always come up with something silly to like do it faster, and that's always, it's so intriguing to me how they come up with this kind of stuff. We had a level where you're a bicycle and you can actually just spam it and then you can make the bicycle fly, because every time you would let go or like drag and pull, the bicycle would do a jump, but you could actually do a jump in the air, so you could just get air traction and then you could go further and further up, like almost like ET, and then you could just do the level super quick. And we patched that fairly early, but somebody actually asked us if we could re-roll that patch, because that was like one of the speedrunner tricks to that level. So we've been looking into it to see if we can actually find out a clever way to like make people decide which kind of version of the game they would play. But like it's definitely not on the top 10 list of things we're gonna do. That's for sure. But it's on the list at least.
You and your list priorities and like making people on the job or some obnoxious thing that you don't understand is whoever screams the loudest. That's just the thing you should be doing.
That's true. Yeah, just precisely. Yeah. At the moment, everybody on our Twitter account, every time you write something, they'll just go, "When are you launching on Switch?" Like, if we show something, like, if we show anything, like, have you had a nice weekend? When are you launching on Switch?
Why you are launching on Switch, so you could people could stop asking those questions.
It's here. Come on, here's the date. Yeah.
What you should do now, just go through all the old Twitter threads and just post like a link to the story page, like under each of those comments.
Yeah.
And just see what happens.
Yeah. That's true.
Well, Rune, thanks for taking time out of your day, my morning, to talk about. We get to rehash What the Golf, your amazing success, by the way. Congratulations again on the success of the game.
Thanks a lot. It was my pleasure. Take care, everybody, and thanks for listening.
Have a good one.
Okay.
I'll do our intro spiel thing and I'll get us started.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another one of hopefully the tail end of these quarantine episodes. I'm Mike. Today with me, not AJ, for another interview guest. Could you please, sir, tell me your name and the game you're working on?
Hi, Mike. My name's Connor O'Kane, and I'm making a VR game called Mars Flight VR.
So Mars Flight VR, I was really excited when I saw this, and that's why I want to talk to you, because I've been talking to a lot of, like, obviously, more games. I've talked to a couple of serious games. This is the first one I talked to where, like, your game, I feel like, is a simulation first, and that fascinates me.
Yes, it is, yes. The last game I made was Ice Caves of Europa, and it was a science fiction. So it was near future sci-fi, but a fantastical story. And so this time I wanted to try something more realistic, and I'm interested in helicopter simulation anyway. I play a lot of civilian and military helicopter sims. And so when I discovered NASA were sending a real helicopter to Mars, I thought that's pretty cool. I'd like to play that. And as a game developer and someone interested in VR, I thought this would be a really interesting VR sim. So that's what inspired me to do it.
Let's take this 10 feet back for a second. So immediately, I'd argue simulation it's a similar skill set because I like a lot of people do both, but it's a different skill set also because inherently it's the disconnect between like fun versus reality. What is
Well,
go on.
yeah, some people find simulation itself to be fun. So the simulation of flying a helicopter, for example, the average gamer expects their game to have shooting and racing and gameplay gimmicks in it. But many people enjoy just flying for the sake of flying. Particularly people like the first-person drone racers who like to fly drones with the video cameras on their heads, or just simulation enthusiasts. I'm not totally targeting the simulation audience. I am putting in some gameplay features to try and make the game have a little bit more of a casual appeal. And I'm also going to try and target museums and educational institutions. So in addition to releasing on Steam, I'm planning to do a sort of a kiosk version that you'll be able to play in museums.
And that to me immediately, for the record, sounds like that. If you're a kid, that is the best way to be like, you want to go to Mars, and they're like, what do you mean? So you picture you put them in a little rocket
That's right.
ship, they have a mask on their head, it'd be perfect.
That's right. And in fact, it's interesting you brought up kids because kids' behavior in VR is really fascinating. VR has a great ability to transport you to somewhere else and make you think that you're there, much more so than, just watching a movie or reading a book. But kids have this amazing ability, or you could say disability, to only be able to perceive one input at a time. So to give a great example, when a kid is enjoying a video game, they will completely forget that they're hungry or that they need to go to the toilet or anything else. They can only experience one stimulus at a time. When you put a kid in VR, the stimulus is so overwhelming, they completely forget about the real world. They will immediately run and hit their head off something or fall over or injure themselves. You have to be very careful with children in VR because they forget about their body. You have to protect them and you have to chaperone them. You know what I mean? So when you put a kid in a VR simulation of Mars, it's not like an adult who would say, "Oh, that's nice, I can see Mars." They really feel like they're there. Their imagination just goes wild, and they feel like they're really there. It's extremely immersive for children. VR is quite dangerous and very immersive for children.
So obviously to get more technical, let's give people a bit of your background then. So obviously you sound like you understand this well and you have this kind of history. What is your like 30-second, 1 minute kind of background to lead you to this game?
I started making video games in the late 90s. I worked at Funcom in Ireland making PlayStation games. Then I moved to Australia in 2002 and I worked on a lot of mobile games. And then eventually I founded my own company and I got interested in VR. And now I also teach. So I teach game design in VR at RMIT, a university in Melbourne. And then I run my own independent studio making games and simulations and training and that kind of thing.
For the record, that for anyone who was unsure, that immediately just clarifies how you really went very much like, let me explain to you the research study differences of all of the different cases of VR. Which, for the record, I've done a lot of VR. I actually didn't know that difference between the young kids versus like as you get older, the like being able to perceive differently.
Well, this is my experience, first of all, from watching children play, but also from being a parent. I have 9-year-old twins, and so they've grown up with technology and with VR becoming something available to them. And it really is apparent the difference when you put a VR headset on an adult or an older person. They are usually self-conscious. They're immediately aware, oh, I look embarrassing. I'm clumsy. I'm dizzy. Do you know what I mean? They're still very much aware of the real world and of the other people watching them, and they don't want to look like a fool. But children don't have that. Children are immediately immersed in the game, and so they're like a sponge. They absorb what they see and consider it to be real. They're just not self-conscious.
Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense of the lack of self-consciousness part. Because yeah, a kid until you get to like, well, your kids are right at the age where they'll stop being self-conscious.
That's
But
right.
until
Once they
then,
get teenagers, they suddenly become aware of how they look to other people.
like when they're a kid,
Before
they
about
just don't
10,
care.
They don't care. Yeah, they don't even perceive other people's emotions very much at all. They're not interested.
Interesting. Okay, so let's jump into this specifically to kind of talk about this overview of VR. Why this? So like, obviously you said you saw NASA and you wanted to create something kind of similar to what they're doing. Have
Yeah.
you made other drone things before, or is this kind of like it's kind of like a two birds one stone thing?
My previous game, Ice Caves of Europa, was a kind of a simplified simulation. It's what you call a 2.5D game where the graphics are 3D, but the gameplay is locked to 2 dimensions. And so it was a flying game where you'd fly an imaginary rover through Europa. So Europa is Jupiter's moon, and in this storyline, you're able to get underneath the surface and explore the ocean underneath. And so I thought, why don't I just take this 2 dimensional sim and turn it into a full 3D sim? So many things were happening at the same time. I was making this simulation. I was hearing the news about the Mars rover, but a third thing was happening. I'm also very interested in 3D printing. And so I've been 3D printing terrains and landscapes and things like that. And one of the things I was very interested in printing was the landscapes of NASA, because NASA's data is public domain. Anybody can download it for free and use it. So I had been downloading the height maps of Mars and producing 3D prints from them. So I had these three skills at the same time. I had knowledge of 3D printing and Martian terrains. I had video game development skill, and I had VR skills. And I thought, this is kind of serendipitous. These all come together at the right time to make this game, which, as far as I can tell, nobody else is making, to accurately simulate the helicopter on Mars. And I think also the fact that this is the first time they've sent a helicopter. They've sent many rovers. But when you tell somebody NASA are going to put a helicopter on Mars, people's normal reaction is, you can't fly a helicopter on Mars. That's ridiculous. There's no air. I thought that's impossible. But it turns out it's not. There's just enough air. The atmosphere is less than 1% of ours. But if you spin the blades fast enough, you can fly.
That is so much. So I'm trying to think. There's a lot to unpack. I feel like what you just said there. Let's start with the obvious thing. Are you using the height maps actually from NASA's data to create this?
Yeah, the landing site that you fly in Mars Flight VR is the actual landing site where the rover is going to land, and it's accurate to 30 centimeters. So the terrain is exactly as it will appear on Mars. Now, I've added little boulders and rocks, and I've added my own interpretation of the colors. The only color pictures we have are from the high-rise camera on the Mars Reconnaissance Orbiter, and it doesn't take photographs in true color like our eyes see, because the scientists are interested in infrared and other wavelengths. So their camera doesn't take an RGB photo that we're used to. So whenever you see color photos of Mars, an artist has interpreted the filters to produce this view. So while the landscape is accurate, the colors I've actually based them on the photos that the Curiosity rover has been taking. So I've assumed that those colors are accurate, and I've made my landscape match those colors. So I'm simulating 35 square kilometers of the landing site. You can visit exactly where the rover is going to land, and then you can fly west to the hills. And I'll tell you a bit about the landing site because it's really interesting. The rover is going to land in a lake bed, which used to be 200 meters underwater 4 billion years ago, and it's going to drive over to a river delta. So there's a river delta just like the Nile Delta on Earth, and it's got these beautiful hills where the river deposited silt, and they're going to explore there and look for fossils and look for signs of life in an ancient Martian riverbed. So yeah, flying around it is really, really fascinating. You really get a sense of the scale of the river delta, and you can see the flat plain of the landing site and the hills where the river entered the crater. It's fascinating.
Comparison's sake, this flight actually on Mars has not happened yet, right? Or as it has?
That's right. That's right. The rover is going to launch. The mission's going to launch in a couple of months, in June, I think. It will land on Mars on February 18th, 2021. The rover will then drop the helicopter and drive away. And then the helicopter will spend a couple of weeks doing tests to make sure it works. And then the plan is they're going to take off, fly for a minute or two, and land again. And then it has to recharge its batteries. It's got a solar panel. They're hoping it'll fly 6 or 7 times. It's got a very nice camera on the bottom, so they'll be able to fly ahead of the rover and take photos. But it's really a sort of an experimental mission that they don't expect it to last long. They're hoping that the rover will last long, obviously, but the helicopter is a prototype and an experiment.
So how excited are you to see these videos and stuff when it comes out, to see how accurate you were?
That's very interesting because I've been flying around these locations for the last year, getting to really know the terrain. I've been placing racetracks and photography missions and things like that in the landscape. So I'm actually very familiar with the landscape. I know where all the sand dunes are. I know where the interesting rocks are. I know exactly which craters the rover is going to stop at on its way to the river delta. And so what I'm going to do is when the photos of the real location come out, I'm going to put them back into the game so that players can then fly over to the crater where the rover is right now, and real photos from the location will pop up in the VR view so you can see the real view as well and see how close I was.
That's amazing, and at the same time, I assume it's nerve-wracking to be like, let's hope I'm not really off here. Because all of a sudden you're like
Well,
that's not there.
I'm pretty sure my colors will be wrong. I'm sure that the textures will be wrong, but I expect that the heights will be pretty accurate. The only thing that will have changed is the sand dunes. The rocks and the hills will be the same.
Wow. Okay. So I want to go back to something we kind of talked about in the beginning a bit, which was this. You said was more simulation, but not a pure simulation. So do you mind talking about some of those more like gamifying elements you've had to make this quote unquote more fun?
Yeah. One of the first things you gotta be aware of in VR is motion sickness. So you can't just put the player in the helicopter and expect them to fly it because they'll get sick. Most people are not used to flying helicopters and tilting the camera. So one of the things I've been working hard on is to make the experience smooth and to avoid acceleration so that players don't feel sick. Um, my default view is a third-person view from behind the helicopter. And so when the helicopter tilts, the camera stays stable and you see the helicopter rotating, but your view doesn't. And then if you spin the helicopter around, I have my camera on a kind of a spring so that it slowly follows and accelerates very smoothly. And this prevents you from getting motion sickness. And then I've also added in races and photography missions, and there's little secrets and information screens hidden about the map that you can explore and look for. So there is some concession to what you might call gaming, but I don't think the game is going to appeal to casual gamers. I mean, obviously you need a PC and a VR headset to play it in the first place, so that narrows out a lot of people.
That obviously you're cutting your market immensely, but it's interesting because keeping a thought in my head of like the big VR things and even the more simulation things. I feel like as we talk about like one of the few like I think Google Earth is one of those examples of things you kind of go places and kind of do those things, but I feel like we'd very rarely see the drone-ness of it, and I think it goes back to the problem you said about like motion sickness. I think is the big problem.
Yeah, the key thing you've got to avoid is the discrepancy between the acceleration perceived by the eyes and the acceleration perceived by the inner ear. And the number one thing that sets that off is tilting the camera. If you tilt the camera at all, players will feel terrible. So that's the first thing I've turned off. I have actually included a first-person view for the people that like drone racing and that are used to those kind of views, but the normal experience will be very stable and sedate.
Interesting. So I'm curious, just because obviously in real life when the people see this and whatever, like when they're at NASA, they're not in VR. Did you think of it having like a non-VR simple mode, or is this to you like this just is VR?
The impact from seeing a location in VR is so much better, it's so much bigger that I'm targeting VR first because really I want people to realize that Mars is not a faraway planet, a distant exotic location. It's actually quite mundane and it's easy for us to visit. We can get there in 6 months. It's not far at all. It's safer than going to the moon in many ways because it has an atmosphere. And so just playing it on your screen, playing it in pancake mode, as they call it on your flat screen, is just like playing any other video game. But you mentioned Google Earth VR, and I think that's particularly telling. A lot of people have experienced going back to their childhood town or their childhood house even in Google Earth VR and going into Street View, and it triggers an extremely emotional response because they feel like they're really there. If you show somebody a photograph of their childhood home, they'll say, oh, that's lovely, I remember this and I remember that. But if you put them in Google Earth VR and fly them down to their childhood home, which they haven't seen in decades, it triggers a very strong emotional response. And I think it's because of the sense of depth. The depth makes it feel like it's real, as opposed to a photograph, which you always know is a photograph. So when people see Mars in VR, it triggers a much stronger response. And in fact, I showed the game to a lot of Mars enthusiasts at the Mars Society's annual convention last year in LA. So these are people who love Mars, who write about it and read about it, a lot of engineers who are working on missions to Mars. And when they jump into VR, they suddenly go, wow, it's real. Oh, I didn't realize how far those hills were. I didn't realize how how small that crater was. It all suddenly becomes tangible, a real location. It's not just somewhere far away. So that's why I'm targeting VR first. VR has this amazing power to make you realize that a place is real and feel like you're really there.
And so first off, I appreciate how there's a Mars Society. I had no clue there was a Mars Society. I'm gonna start.
There is. They advocate for uh, the exploration and eventual colonization of Mars.
That is. There's so much there. So you showed off to them. Have you showed off this game to any other like broad swaths of people and gotten like feedback on it?
Uh, well, there are a lot of folks from NASA at the conference, and they enjoyed it a lot. I teach a VR class at RMIT, so I get my students to play test. So they're very good as a playtesting audience. But other than that, mainly I've been sending out Steam keys to people to get the game tested on as much different hardware as possible. So I'm an indie developer. I make the game mostly myself. I outsource some of the art to freelance artists, and I buy a lot of assets on the Unity asset store to get the game done more quickly. But mainly it's just me. So there's a limited amount of hardware I can test on. So I send out a lot of Steam keys to friends and family and colleagues to get them to try it out on different hardware. And eventually what I'm going to do is release it in Steam Early Access so people can play it before it's finished. And that way I can get feedback from gamers and simulation fans and helicopter fans and Mars geeks like me to see what everybody really wants in the game. And I'm planning to support it with new features gradually right up until the rover arrives next year in February, and then have the full launch when the rover lands.
That immediately is very curious to me because I feel so. Obviously, what I was about to get to anyway. You're going into early access, and early access to me, I
Yeah.
feel like the games it's best with are games that tend to be more like content heavy games. Like, here is our first mission, we'll have 20, or here is roguelike, so here is this system we're going to rebalance. I find it very interesting with your type of game where it sounds like fundamentally it's vertically going to be the same game. You're just kind of adding either subsets to it or tweaking VR balances. Like, I'm curious why
Yeah.
early access in
But
that way.
the main thing I'm going to be adding is new scenes. So the Jezero crater landing site is the first one because that's where the next rover is going to land. But I'm going to add as many of the landing sites of previous rovers as well, so you can explore where Spirit and Opportunity and Curiosity have landed and see other places on Mars. But then there's some other interesting things I'd like to try. I'd like to try expanding beyond helicopters and do missions that simulate, for example, a SpaceX rocket landing on Mars. What would it be like to take manual control of that? Or the sky crane that delivers the rovers? Are you aware of how the modern rovers land on Mars?
Can't say
They
I
don't
am. I can't
they
say I
don't
am.
use they used to use inflatable like balloons. Basically they used to land on balloons or airbags that would cushion them and they bounce. But the new rovers are so big, they weigh as much as a car, that they can't stop them with balloons. So they use what's called a sky crane, which is basically like a Harrier jump jet. So a kind of a rocket ship carries the rover underneath its belly and then lowers the rover on a cable. And so the rocket ship is flying about 50 meters above the ground, lowering the rover on a cable, and it touches the wheels down softly and then severs the cable, and then the crane flies away. So it's really an amazing feat that this thing is flying itself autonomously from when it drops out of the back shell and the parachute has been deployed, and it has to land the rover. So I think that'll be another fun mission to try and simulate, to try and hit the landing site. So I'm going to put in new vehicles like the SpaceX rockets and the sky crane, and then new locations. And I also want to put in some features specifically for flight sim fans, such as flight sticks, the kind of joysticks that simulator pilots like to fly with.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to add support for that as well.
Interesting. So I'm curious and maybe you wouldn't know this because you don't sound very lawyer backgroundy. So what is the legal line of? Obviously, you said like NASA stuff is like common works. What about like putting in like the Tesla rocket stuff too? Are you able to, or do you have to be like, this isn't the Tesla rocket, but it is?
Yeah, exactly. Once it's a private company, it's likely to be copyrighted, so I'd have to get approval from SpaceX to use their logo or their rockets. With NASA, it's different. With NASA, everything they produce is in the public domain. You still have to credit them and say where you got it, but you're free to use it, even for commercial use.
That is interesting. And again, a little feat I didn't know about. I guess it makes sense though, because NASA's mission in theory is like the general purpose of science. But yeah, that's very interesting.
That's
that
right.
you can do anything with
Yes.
that stuff.
Yeah, because they're a government agency, they release all of their data into the public domain,
So you
which is very good of them.
makes sense. You have to pay the U.S. government then a small fee. Would you say a small fee? Well, we'll call it taxes. So you could use their data.
Yes, yes, exactly.
I get it. I'm paying for your right to use the NASA data. Okay, that makes perfect sense.
Thank you.
So we just talk about then. So your goal really, this early access is going through adding the new features and stuff. So is your goal? So your goal then, just to clarify, you said is to release this when it lands on Mars, when it starts
That's right.
exploring
Yes.
Mars.
Yeah. It's gonna launch pretty soon. It's gonna land in February next year. And so I want to come out of early access and announce that the game is now feature complete and ready to pay full price at that point.
So you're gonna make me jump into it and ask you then, what do you consider early access price and what is full price?
Oh, I'm going to do $15 US early access and then 30 for full price.
Okay, so it's a big. So you feel the jump then is gonna be that a ton more content and all that.
Yeah, well, to be honest, I'm giving away as many free keys as I can right now. I want to get feedback from players with lots of different hardware. I'll send you some Steam keys you can give out to your listeners. So if any of your listeners have a VR headset, I'll provide a link where they can sign up and get a free Steam key to try it out.
Sure, that'd be great. But yeah, that I can imagine because I've done VR testing and that was like when it was easier when I was either near a major city or a major education environment. It was really easy to get testers. I just walk up and go, "Who wants to play
Right.
this thing?" And you just get people lining up.
That's hard to do in a pandemic.
Pandemic. My understanding of Australia is you're not the most densely populated areas. Like,
Yeah, well, actually, one of the benefits of living in Australia is that you're not a travel hub. So there's very few people traveling through Australia to get somewhere else, which means our outbreak has been our numbers are very low. I think less than 100 people have died here so far.
which considering if I'm correct, like Australia is like a decent enough sized country. Those numbers actually are significant. Like
Yeah,
almost
there's
every
about
U.S.
25 million people.
Right. That means you're bigger than basically all but two United States, and you have less deaths than all but like five of them. Is what that ends up being.
There you go. Yeah, and that I think is down to largely luck because we're isolated physically. Um, so people just don't want to travel through here. But also we don't have the same backlash against the social distancing that you're seeing in the US. We don't have a lot of people complaining about having to stay at home.
So your outside is really scary, so that could be part of it.
That's right. If there were more saltwater crocodiles and poisonous spiders roaming around America, people would be more happy to stay at home, I suspect.
So I have one final sub thing I kind of want to ask before we get to the end of this, and that's just because you said your background right now for part of your income is teaching. I'm
That's right,
curious
yes.
what it's been like, and just a general question, teaching in this pandemic of like, because I assume now everything's online for you guys, all that fun stuff
Yes.
we deal with in the U.S.
Yes, yes. That's a good question because I'm teaching a VR course and we had recently invested in a ton of nice hardware to set up in the labs for all our students to try. And unfortunately, they don't get to play with those. So my class are all studying from home. I chat to them on Discord and on Canvas, which is our learning environment. And what I'm doing is I record videos of me developing the game in Unity or playing VR games and discussing it. And I put them up for them to watch. And then we all chat on a Discord channel. In fact, we all chat about the content on Discord. Some of my students have VR headsets, so they're working at home on their own. And for those that don't, they send a build to me and I test it in VR. And I provide them with tools to develop in Unity without the VR headset. So that's how we're going right now.
That just sounds. I understand the necessities, but it just sounds like the most painful thing I've ever heard. like
Well, they're running around with WASD first-person controls in their level, but they're unable to actually reach out and pick the things up.
I
They have to send the build to me, and I test it.
I can only imagine the amount of builds you get, and you just go, "This doesn't work." Like I feel like that's every other build.
I'm surprisingly patient.
At least to their face, you're surprisingly patient. You get it. You're like screaming. It's like 2 a.m. You're like, "How is this
Well,
not working?"
That's one of the benefits of remote teaching. They don't see that side. But we have had some dropouts. So some people have been unable to get here. A lot of international students just got stuck because they were coming from China or coming from Singapore and they just weren't allowed to leave. So I've had about 5 or 6 students have to just drop out because it just became impractical. But I'm happy to say most of the students are sticking with it and still submitting their assignments.
I'm gonna say it. You get to go like honorary saint status just for dealing with that. Your students,
Okay.
they get in the job market. It'll be much easier for them to develop in VR because they'll be like, wait, I have a headset.
It's too easy. Yeah, they've been playing on hard mode.
Perfect. Well, Connor, thanks for talking to me about Mars Flight VR. Could you tell all the people where they find the game, when they can find it?
Yeah, it's already on Steam. The storefront is on Steam. But what I'll do is I'll email you a link to a location where they can apply to get a free key, and you can put that into the end of the podcast. All right.
But otherwise, yeah, it's Mars Flight VR on Steam,
Mars
and then
Flight VR. Yep.
ionormal.com?
That's my development company. That's right.
Okay, so they can see all of your past products
game,
and VR.
Yeah, the game will be initially available on PC VR, meaning the Oculus Rift, the Vive, and the Windows MR headsets. If it does well, and if I make any money out of it, I'd also like to port it to PlayStation VR and the Oculus Quest.
Interesting. Okay. Well, best of luck to you, and good luck trying to make this Mars as accurate as humanly possible.
Thank you very much. Nice talking to you.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another one of these fine, fun quarantine edition episodes of the SWW show. We are not going crazy in quarantine, people, I swear. I know I'm talking to myself, so that's definitely a sign we're going crazy. Today I have with me 2 special guests to talk about the game that they are making. Why don't we start with you, Thomas? Tell us the name of the game, who you are, and what you're working on?
Yeah, so my name is Thomas Cashman. I'm the programmer on Alchemic. The game is sort of a wholesome, relaxing adventure where you catch little jellies or slimes. You feed them things to level them up, and then you enter them into like little jelly competitions. And then there's like all these kind of wholesome stories and adventures that you can go on.
Nice. And then also we have with us...
Yeah, my name is Sebastian Vakrix. I'm the artist for the game. Among other things, along with Tom.
Okay, yeah. So here to talk about is you guys could Alchemic Cutie, which I'm hoping I'm phrasing right. So immediately, I've got to point the real thing. Do you guys really like the 80s RPG? I take it. Look.
Yeah. I think we're both kind of big RPG fans.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, we're both, I think we got started with gaming in the 90s. So that's when Pixar was more of a functional reality than an art style. And for me personally, that just kind of carried forward in terms of...
I grew up playing Pokemon, so 2D kind of pixel art RPGs
are your thing beyond belief. That makes perfect sense.
As well, like, I think the other kind of idea behind it is that me and Sebastian, we ended up kind of not being so successful in those by ourselves. And then Sebastian kind of messaged me and was like, "Hey, do you want to work on something together?" And we were like, "Sure." So we tried to come up with something that we both kind of were interested in, and we were trying to go for something kind of chilled out, a bit more relaxing compared to your typical kind of RPG, I guess, so we get, this is kind of what we ended up with.
Yeah, so it's very interesting to me because obviously talk about it immediately. I think there's I think it's a unique look, but it's a very distinctive look of like where you guys are trying to get your inspiration from and emulating. And what also interests me is I think we've had these chain of games recently. Obviously, Animal Crossing's the most recent of this kind of like the goal is still like being this back end kind of hardcore, kind of stat tracking, kind of this, but on the front it's very much a like, let's not trust the player out. Let's do this thing, and that's very much on their pacing and their timing of what they want to do. I'm curious though, from a design point of view. So this might be either of you, kind of, how do you define when something is too stressful or too much for a player if you're trying to keep this kind of chill atmosphere going?
Well, I think part of it in terms of design is the reward systems that you use. So, for example, you're playing a shooter and you do poorly, you just die, and then you have to restart. In a more relaxing game, if you lose, you don't necessarily have to restart. You kind of just take maybe a time penalty, like, I just have to maybe spend a little bit more effort to get this to a certain place or take a detour. And I think maybe in the more technical sense is using more positive feedback rather than negative feedback. So when somebody does something wrong, you don't necessarily have to punish them for it, but when they do something right, you reward them for it instead.
Interesting. So, do you mind going into maybe one of your mechanics or systems in there that kind of you'd say kind of correlates to that, what you just said about the positive reinforcement?
So, an example would be when you have your jellies, you can breed multiple jellies together to get different combinations of their special traits, their colors, their shapes, their stats, which is like their fundamental attributes. And when you breed jellies, they lay an egg. Now, if you were to actually pick up that egg, keep it in your backpack with you while you explore, if you pet it, often and take pretty good care of it, it'll hatch much faster. So that's your positive reinforcement there. If you don't do anything, it just kind of hatches when it hatches. So rather than really punishing you for it, like, your egg dies or, it cracks or something, it just keeps going on its own.
That is the most when you mention about Pokemon too. That's the most like, there's the egg, there's the walking with it. But that makes a lot of sense from that idea of, okay, so we're still going to push the game forward, but like the player can speed up that process, decide how they're speeding up that process.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm looking. So on my other second monitor, I have like screenshots and videos of the game going to make sure I have the look in mind too. I'm curious. So I feel like, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, your UI just feels, for this idea of a very chill game, I almost feel like there's a lot there, or at least it's buried in menus a lot. How kind of do you guys balance this to make sure, again, you're not overstressing the player with too much information?
So I think one kind of approach we took was we kind of inspired by Pokemon was that they, when I play Pokemon, like, water beats fire and that's it. I don't really care too much about stats and stuff like that. But like there are people who get really into the like EVs and IVs and natures and traits and all that. So we were trying to take a similar approach where, if you feed the jelly items, eventually they'll level up and, eventually you'll win competitions and stuff. But if you get really into it, you can kind of figure out, it's like, okay, if I feed him this item, he gets a buff for the next hour. But from that buff, and they'll level up quicker. So it's that kind of similar to the egg petting in that if you play it casually, you will progress. But if you get really into the statistics and kind of numbers of it, you can really optimize, I guess, your gameplay.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I think I think too often there are designs where they confuse something that's casual with something that needs to be opaque. So even if a system can be interacted with without knowing the information behind it, that doesn't necessarily mean you should take away all that information because you just think it's going to confuse someone. We're taking the approach where we want as much of the important information to be visible in one way or another, rather than hiding everything because we think, oh, it's going to scare people away. You can get pretty far without, like Tom said, really digging into the numbers. But if you're interested in, efficiency or going for like a specific build of your jellies in the farm, then that's the kind of stuff that you'll need to take a look at.
That's a very interesting way to, I think, go approach it. And I kind of agree with you guys too. That like, okay, here's kind of submenu to like, here are the steps you get right now, but then this way, it doesn't scare off the players. Because I feel like, for example, not your genre, but like an RTS game, I feel like that's a lot of them have. It goes, wait a minute, why are there 20 systems and why are they all on the screen at the same time? And it's so hard to figure like get into. Like again, once you're in it, you're fine, but it's the onboarding process, which is the problem, and I think that's what stresses a lot of players out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like we have. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I actually think that with the notebook, I think really the only 100% vital part of it is probably the quest list, just so you can have information on your objectives. The jelly list, technically, you don't have to look at it to be able to play the game. The codex, which actually fills up with information as you interact with things, like when you feed a jelly an item, it'll insert like what comes out when the jelly poops when you feed them that item. All those other things are there for your convenience as a player, and you can pretty much just play the game without having to use any of those. But we thought they were important enough to include those for the people who really are interested. Number one, in playing the game at a deeper level with the systems, as well as people who maybe like to complete things. So if you feed an item, like if you feed jelly every single item, you'll have those entries in that codex.
I was going to just mention that we have like, I think the best example of it is like knowing whether your jelly is happy or sad. In the overworld, we have a emote pop up above the jelly when they're happy or sad. But if you actually want to go into the notebook and see the numbers as to why the statistical level, why they're happy or sad, you can do that. But from a casual gamer, you can see the emote and go, oh yeah, he's happy, so.
I do like that. You're like, no, there's a smile on his face, so we're good to go. And then it's good. But yeah, it's a very interesting way again of like being like, okay, here's the top level of like, okay, quick player can go check this out and they don't care, but then a deeper player can go in and be like, why?
Exactly.
So I'm curious. So first off, is this programmed in Unity or do you guys use your own engine?
So it's built in a custom engine. So it's programmed in Java on top of a framework that I maintain called MiniQDX, which is an open source framework. So we built the custom engine on top of that so that we can do modding support when the game launches. So a lot of the game content is built using these modding tools that we've made, various like XML files or, different types of data formats. So the idea would be that once the game comes out, we can easily add new content without having to go in and program new things. So, and then we're kind of hoping as well that the community might kind of grow around that and add new content as well. it would be cool to see kind of new quest lines and new kind of stories being added by the community.
So
And
that
going back, sorry, just real quick, going back to the art style stuff, that's another reason we went with that, because it's very simple to get into. The art style that we have, like the tile maps, character sprites, and things like that. So hopefully that's going to help people contribute.
So as we get in the modding talk, then to clarify, then the art itself is also moddable. You can switch that out too, not just the quest lines and text.
Yeah, you can add like new textures into your mod if you want, and then reference them in the modding data.
Okay, because I know some games like this kind of tend to be like, oh no, you could add new text and new quests, and not per se new art, just because it's depending on your pipeline at hand.
Yeah,
No,
so the levels are made in Tiled, which is a free software you can just download.
Yeah, the tile. A lot of people in Unity used it, I think.
Yeah, so if you have a tile map and Tiled, you can make new levels, so to speak, worlds or locations, however you want to call them. And then a good amount of the, I guess, quest logic, maybe you could say, or maybe design, like world design kind of stuff you can do with objects in Tiled. So you can put waypoints, warp points, spawn points, items, things like that. So
Such a very interesting way to go through and think about it. So I'm curious then. So you guys obviously you said there's modding built in that. So I assume from the get-go you guys had to be like, we need mods in this game, just the way you've built it.
Yeah, so it was kind of a conscious decision from the beginning because now, I mean, we started this game back in 2015, and back then, you had the likes of kind of Minecraft and Stardew Valley just come out, and on both of those games, everyone was like, "Oh, we want mods, we want mods, we want mods," So seeing how a game can, like a community can want that, like if a game becomes popular, we were conscious that we should do that from the beginning, because reverse engineering mods into your game after the fact is it's quite a headache. So
yeah.
sorry, I was just going to say, so we made the decision to kind of code it from the beginning rather than after.
Yeah, and if I can just share my own selfish motivations, I enjoy mods in like Skyrim and Fallout and stuff, and I really enjoy doing like simple ones, just like data editing. So I wanted to see that in the game that I'd worked on. And the second part is related to, how do you say, like workflow, I guess. So because Tom is our main programmer, we have some people helping us out. But if there's anything significant, it needs to be done by Tom. So having it set up where a lot of the game content is created through the modding tools means that I can do a lot of things as well. So, I can place all the map objects for warps and waypoints and spawn data and all this stuff. I can configure, resource nodes and all the item information. So there's a lot that I can do just because we have the modding tools that if we didn't have those tools, may have been inaccessible to me.
Makes a lot of sense of just from your workflow of how separate you guys are. Of like, I didn't think of that one. Of like, oh, it's a mod tool, so just plug and chug basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we try to, especially with Sebastian being in a different time zone as well. Like, it's handy for him not to be sitting there waiting for me to do something.
Be really tired otherwise is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So let's go back for a second. We're going to go pure pandemic times for a second. You guys, my understanding is, showed off this game like right before the pandemic at PAX East.
We did.
So I'm curious, kind of, because I assume you guys have some level of internal, like, testing the game, playing around, like, what that was comparatively to, like, getting a ton of people's hands on the game, and, like, what was, like, not what you expected to happen.
So we'd shown off the game before at Gamescom and EGX in previous years. And, yeah, the reality is kind of making a demo for a conference eats up a lot of time and resources. So, because you have to make sure everything within that kind of small section is kind of running correctly and is enjoyable. Now, the reality is as well is that you're not going to have all your bugs fixed for your exact demo. So, and players will find bugs that you just hadn't anticipated or tested. Especially since we're a small team as well, that, it's hard to test every sort of edge case, play test it before a conference. A lot of times the demo that's seen at a conference is only finished like 2 or 3 days beforehand. We do try to use a lot of automated testing to find bugs and catch issues. I came from a software engineering background, so automated testing sort of drilled into me. And we try to use that to kind of catch bugs, but obviously it doesn't catch everything. So, yeah,
I appreciate for the record you saying that you're like games finish 3 days before. That's not true. We all know games finish demos like an hour before the showroom is what's really happening at the time. It's like you're walking to the showroom, hitting build, hoping it worked.
Yeah, pretty much. For PAX, I was coding on the plane over to Boston. So,
which, for the record, for everyone listening, do not do that. Extremely dangerous. You're gonna break something, but you're gonna do it.
Yeah, I think do kind of testings or get lots of content in. So there's so I think most small indie teams do that. Probably AAA studios as well. But I've never worked in a AAA studio, so I don't know. But I wouldn't be surprised.
Depends how good their producers are. A good producer will be like, totally you can mess with this, and secretly take a secret build that they can't fix, so they don't know that is what they should be doing.
Yeah.
Because developers are gonna do it, so you just trick them to think they're doing it.
Yeah.
Perfect. So one other thing I have for you guys. So you guys are a smaller, newerish team. What intrigues me about you guys too is you guys actually have a publisher that are helping on this game.
Yeah, so we signed with Circle Entertainment about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. So that took quite a long time to get a publisher. So for the first kind of 3 years, we were working on the game in our spare time, like at weekends, pretty much. Then in 2018, I was kind of sick of my job and stuff, and I said, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to go pitch the game to publishers. And I spent about kind of 8 or 9 months pitching to well over 20 publishers. Yeah, getting a publishing deal is quite a difficult task.
Just show up with a giant briefcase, knock on a door, and say, "Give me money."
No.
So I'm curious then, just if you could enlighten maybe some people who doesn't always go through this on the broadest sense term. What is that like? Do you go produce slides for them? Do you just go to cold emailing? Or what was your step of getting a publisher?
So for us, we actually went to conferences. So I signed up to I think about 5 or 6 different conferences that had business sections. So they weren't kind of consumer. Some of them were consumer conferences that had a business section, and some of them were business only conferences.
Has a business section.
Yeah. And the good thing is some of these conferences have a dedicated business meeting system where you can log in you pay to log in, and then you can see all the publishers who are attending, and you can kind of email people through that system to request meeting times, and everyone has their calendar on the system that you can see who's available when and so on. So then you'd go to the meetings, and every time I'd have a PowerPoint, and then I'd show them a build of the game and, get a kind of feel for it. The funny thing was that Circle Entertainment weren't a publisher that we ended up pitching to. Their CEO was just kind of walking by our booth at Gamescom and was like, "Oh, this is what we need." So we so like despite all the pitching, it turns out just showing the game at the Indie Zone just kind of got us the publishing deal.
For the record, I would love to like understand his mindset of like the like where in your mindset you go. The hole in my portfolio is the game about like collecting jellies. Like I'd be very curious, like how that.
Yeah, well, Circle they're pretty big in the kind of Asian market. So they're mainly based in their headquarters is in Hong Kong, and they've been around for like 12, 14 years or so. They started out making games for the DS, and then just grew into publishing. They're mainly Nintendo focused originally, but now they're focusing on other platforms and stuff, and they're trying to expand into the Western market as well. But so Chris, the CEO, was looking for games that he knew would work well in the Asian market, and yeah, this type of game would work well apparently. So yeah, that's why they were interested in the game. And this was one thing that I learned the kind of hard way was that every publisher has a kind of brand or image that they're trying to like maintain. So like we were pitching games to publishers, and looking back on it now, I shouldn't have even bothered pitching it to the publisher because our game just didn't match their portfolio.
Like some will say indie publishers tend to be a little more edgy, we'll say is their image, and I feel like this is not an edgy game, for example.
Right. So there was, I say we probably wasted a bit of time kind of trying to get into some publishers because it just wasn't their game. And so I've learned now that like if you are pitching, find the exact publisher for your game. Like there will be, there are some publishers out there who are kind of general publishers. They'll just publish anything that's good, whereas like you said, some publishers are like, okay, our brand is like edgy games. We go for that. Like our brand is horror games, so there is a kind of process in like how which publishers you should kind of go to.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. So,
can I also make another quick point about the convention stuff?
Yeah.
So, obviously, part of the reason you want to go to conventions is to solve the discoverability issue. If you never bring your game to some kind of event, you're kind of just hoping that it's going to get noticed online through something. So there's that, pretty straightforward value of it. There's also the playtesting value, of course. People, when they get like a balance point in your game where they would potentially want to stop playing at a convention, they're just going to just quit like immediately because there's other things to do. And the last thing is, if you think that you can't afford to go to a convention, make sure to check if that convention sponsors any indie booths. I know that there are some amount of smaller conventions that are specifically looking for people to show up, and then they're going to pay the booth costs and stuff like that. So you may still end up having to pay travel and room and board and stuff, but always check and see if whatever convention you're looking at has some kind of sponsored indie area.
Yeah, because that's always a ton cheaper. Because looking at those costs for it, that is the expensive part of the cost normally, is the booth and all that.
Yeah, especially if it's domestic travel like in the U.S. or, inside of Europe. The actual travel to get there is going to be a small part of the total cost in comparison.
Yeah, so I have found that like hotels and accommodation just jack up their prices whenever a conference is on. So, you're gonna get screwed either way.
That's when you do the college kid thing of like just have like 10 people in a hotel room and you're perfect. Perfect. Well, Thomas, Sebastian, do you guys have anything else that you feel like we missed that people need to know about your game as we get to the end of this?
Yeah, Tom, hit him with the website stuff.
So if you go to alchemiccutie.com, you can sign up. You can get our Discord link and stuff. We have a community on Discord who we have like a jelly bot that we all raise, and we kind of post all of our updates and news there. And we also have Twitter, Facebook, our Steam wishlist page is there. And so yeah, we're hoping to come out in summer, and yeah, keep an eye out for the game.
Sebastian, you gave Tom the easy question. I have the harder question for you now. You ready?
Yeah, sure.
You game since 2020. Do you have anything else on that one, or is it just still 2020 is our magic day?
2020 is some magic day. We're still working on it, so we'll see. We really don't want to put out anything half-baked. We spent a lot of time and effort on this, and the last thing we want to do is rush it out at the end. I mean, this is a big deal for us, so we don't want to give the players anything lame.
Fair enough. Well, guys, thanks again for the time. I guess one of you go enjoy your morning, the other one of you go enjoy your evening, whatever time it is over in Europe right now, because time zones are fun.
Yep.
You too.
Well, thanks. Have a good day.
This podcast was a product of the SWW show. You can find more at the SWWshow.com or Facebook.com/the SWW store or Twitter.com/SWW. You can find out more about Mike at Mikey_Maroney on Twitter and more about AJ at LoCBor on Twitter. Remember, new episodes come out twice a month, one focusing on the new entertainment news and one focusing on movie club, so new and an old movie. You can find out more again at the SWWshow.com, and you can find the show on podcast services around the globe.